They locked me out of the office at exactly 9:07 a.m. And at first I thought it was a mistake. The glass doors didn't slide open like they had every morning for the past 11 years. I tried my badge again. Red light. A soft mechanical beep. Denied. I stepped back, checked the card. Wiped it against my sleeve like that could somehow fix a system decision already made. People streamed past me from the parking garage, suits, coffee cups. Familiar faces pretending not to notice me standing there. Confused, frozen like a glitch in the building's routine. When I finally caught my reflection in the glass, I looked calm. Inside, something had already cracked. I pulled out my phone. No signal inside the lobby. That was new. The security desk, usually staffed by 2 guards who knew me by name, had one unfamiliar face. He avoided eye contact. I walked over anyway. "My badge isn't working," I said. He didn't even look up at first. Just tapped at his screen, and then finally met my eyes with rehearsed indifference. "You'll need to wait outside. HR will contact you." That was it. No explanation. No apology. 11 years reduced to a sentence delivered like a parking violation. I stepped back outside into the cold morning air. Glass tower looming behind me, like I'd never belonged there at all. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. Then it buzzed. One message. From an unknown internal number. "Please do not attempt to re-enter the premises. Your access has been temporarily suspended pending review." Temporarily. That word hung there. Pretending this was reversible. Pretending this wasn't already decided. I sat on the concrete bench across the street, watching the building that still carried projects I'd built from nothing. This wasn't just my workplace. This was my life's work. I'd helped take the company public. I'd negotiated deals that doubled revenue. I'd signed off on acquisitions that reshaped entire markets. And now I couldn't even get through the door. At 9:19 a.m., my assistant texted me from her personal phone. "They told us not to contact you. Your email access is gone." I'm so sorry. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a lockout. Clean, coordinated, silent. By 9:30, rumors were already moving faster than facts. I saw it in the way people glanced over their shoulders through the glass. I saw it in the way my name disappeared from the internal directory. When I managed to load it on mobile data, I called the CFO. Straight to voicemail. I called legal. Disconnected. HR. Automated response. Every door was closed, digitally and otherwise. What they didn't know was that while they were busy erasing me from systems, I was still connected to something they couldn't touch. A deal they thought was theirs. A structure they'd never fully understood, because they trusted me to handle it quietly. The lockout wasn't about performance. It wasn't about misconduct. It was about fear. Someone had realized too late that the company didn't fully own what it thought it did. That a $5 billion royalty framework, buried inside a licensing agreement everyone had stopped reading years ago, didn't belong to the board. It didn't belong to the CEO. It belonged to a separate entity that answered to one signature, mine. At 10:04 a.m., my phone rang. "Private number," I answered. "This is HR," a woman said, voice carefully neutral. "We need you to come in later today to discuss next steps." I almost laughed. "You locked me out," I replied. Silence. Security protocols required it. No, panic required it. By 10:30, the executive floor was in damage control mode. I knew because my former mentor texted me one word. Careful. That was all. Enough to confirm what I already suspected. They had discovered the clause. Or worse, an external party had. At 11:12 a.m., my lawyer called me before I could call him. "Do not go back there. he said. Whatever they're doing, it's reactive. And sloppy. He paused. Did you authorize the royalty separation 3 years ago? I looked across the street at the building that had just thrown me out. Yes, I said. Exactly as written. He exhaled slowly. Then they're in trouble. Inside the office, they were scrambling to reconstruct authority they no longer had. They were pulling contracts, calling consultants, asking questions they should have asked years earlier. Outside, I sat with my coat zipped up, phone pressed to my ear, listening as the shape of the truth finally surfaced. At noon, the board convened an emergency call without me. At 12:17 p.m., the CEO demanded an explanation from legal that didn't exist. At 12:41, an external partner froze payments. At 12:58, someone finally realized the $5 billion royalty stream they'd counted as future revenue was never fully theirs to control. And at 1:03 p.m., the same security guard who wouldn't meet my eyes earlier stepped outside and said quietly, "Sir, they're asking if you can come upstairs now." I stood up, brushed off my coat, and smiled for the first time that day. Because now they understood. And this was only the beginning. When I walked back into the building at 1:11 p.m., the atmosphere had changed completely. The same glass doors that had rejected me hours earlier slid open without resistance, almost apologetically. Security didn't stop me this time. No badge, no questions. People stepped aside as I passed, their whispers following me down the marble hallway. Some looked confused, some curious, a few terrified. They already knew something was wrong. They just didn't know how bad it was going to be. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. Each floor chimed past like a countdown. I replayed the last decade in my head. Every meeting where I'd been told to handle it quietly. Every contract they'd waved through without reading. Every time I'd warned that shortcuts in governance always came back with interest. They'd nodded, smiled, trusted me, then replaced trust with arrogance. The doors opened to chaos. Phones ringing. Papers scattered. Lawyers huddled near the glass conference room, voices low and frantic. The CEO stood near the window, jacket off, tie loosened, staring at the city like it might offer an escape route. When he turned and saw me, his face didn't show anger. It showed relief and fear. "Thank you for coming," he said too quickly. No apology. No explanation for the lockout. Just survival mode. "You locked me out," I replied calmly. "So let's not pretend this is a courtesy visit." The board was already seated. 7 people who had voted unanimously that morning to suspend my access pending review. The same people now avoiding eye contact. Legal counsel slid a folder across the table toward me, hands shaking just enough to notice. "We need clarification," the chairwoman began. "About the royalty structure." I didn't open the folder. I didn't need to. "You approved it," I said. 3 years ago. Section 14.2. Subsection C. The CFO swallowed hard. That clause was misunderstood. "No," I said. "It was ignored." Silence filled the room, heavy and undeniable. Finally, I spoke again, slowly, deliberately, so there could be no confusion. "The $5 billion royalty stream you've been forecasting to investors isn't owned by the operating company. It never was. It's licensed through a separate holding entity, structured for long-term risk insulation. An entity you authorized. An entity I manage." The CEO leaned forward. "You manage?" "I control," I corrected. "Per the agreement you signed." Legal flipped through papers, desperate now, eyes scanning for loopholes that didn't exist. One of the board members finally snapped. "Why wasn't this disclosed to us more clearly?" "It was," I said, repeatedly. "You didn't ask questions because the numbers looked good." You stopped reading once the revenue projections made you comfortable. The truth landed like a physical blow. Outside the room, assistants pretended not to listen while hearing everything. Inside, the empire they'd built on assumptions was collapsing in real time. At 2:07 p.m., the first external call came in. A major partner formally suspended collaboration pending clarification of ownership rights. At 2:19, the bank froze anticipated inflows tied to the royalty stream. At 2:31, investor relations reported that word had leaked. Stock volatility spiked. The CEO finally said what he'd been avoiding all day. "What do you want?" I looked around the table. "I wanted governance," I said. "I wanted transparency. I wanted you to listen when I warned you. But since you chose to lock me out instead..." I paused. "Now we renegotiate." By 3 p.m., the board had reversed the suspension. By 3:22, my access was fully restored. By 3:40, they were no longer negotiating for a position of power. The holding entity exercised its rights. Royalties were redirected. Control shifted exactly as the contract allowed. Perfectly legal. Perfectly documented. Perfectly irreversible. At 4:15 p.m., the CEO resigned. At 4:47, 2 board members followed. At 5:03 p.m., an emergency disclosure was drafted for regulators and shareholders. The words "unexpected structural exposure" appeared more than once. I left the building just after sunset, walking past the same security desk where I'd been dismissed that morning. The guard nodded this time. Respect or fear, it didn't matter. By the end of the week, the company still existed, but smaller, humbler, stripped of the illusion that it controlled everything it touched. The $5 billion reality didn't destroy them overnight. It taught them something far worse. That power without understanding is temporary. They locked me out thinking silence was control. They unlocked a truth that rewrote everything. And that day ended exactly where it began. With a door. This time, they made sure it never closed again.